that I've decided in November I intend to vote for Donald Trump. Now, I know a lot of people in this room, like I, have struggled in this election. Have struggled to know what's the right thing to do. What is the right decision? What's the honorable decision? I'll tell you that's something. All we can do is go to the Lord in prayer, follow our conscience, and try to make the best decisions we can. And so what I want to do tonight to my friends is explain why I came to that decision. And I recognize there are people in this room who agree with that decision, who are glad I came to that decision. I recognize there are other people in this room who may be less than thrilled. For me, it was really two things. Number one, a year ago, I stood on stage in front of the American people, and I made a promise I will support the Republican nominee. That's a promise I made to the people across this country. And as I thought about it and prayed about it, what to do, what my conscience told me is I need to keep my word. And so that was a major factor. The factor that I had stood up and made that promise in the beginning. Before this journey was traveled, before some of the water under the bridge was spilled, that was a promise I made, and I've decided I'm going to honor that promise. But there's a second component. I'm not going to deny that I have had some differences with the Republican Party.
Thank goodness.
But I could also tell you what I'm absolutely certain, which is that Hillary Clinton is a train wreck who would be a disaster for this country. And I tried to answer the question each and every day, each and every month. What's the right decision for my kids, for your kids, and for the future of this country? And I'll tell you, there were 6 policy issues that were right at the heart of my decision. Number one, and first and foremost, was the Supreme Court. Now, all of you who know me know that the Constitution and Bill of Rights are my first love. That I've spent almost my whole adult life fighting to defend the Constitution and Bill of Rights in front of the Supreme Court. And I can tell you just about every one of our fundamental rights is hanging by a thread. You take the Second Amendment. Any folks here care about the Second Amendment?
Woo!
Yeah!
I love these dances. Although I'm actually impressed. Half the time you say that here, people pull out their guns and start shooting. You get in real trouble with management if you put bullet holes in their ceiling. So I appreciate the restraint that everyone shows. But the Second Amendment, the case of Heller versus District of Columbia, which I had the privilege of leading the states defending the Second Amendment, we won that case 5-4. We are one justice away from the individual right to keep and bear arms being erased from the Bill of Rights. Justice Antonin Scalia was one of those 5 votes. With his passing, the next president, likely in January of next year, will decide whether the 5th vote is to preserve and protect that Second Amendment or to try to rip it away by force from Washington. Religious liberty. Something as fundamental to all of us as anything you can think of. There is a reason why religious liberty is the first right protected in the first clause of the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights to the Constitution. Because without religious liberty, none of the rest of it matters. As you all know, in Texas, I had the privilege of standing alongside Greg Abbott defending the Ten Commandments monument on the state capitol grounds. In front of the Supreme Court, we won 5-4. Scalia was one of those 5. We're one justice away from the Supreme Court ordering Ten Commandments monuments torn down all the time. In private practice, I represented 3 million veterans defending the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial, a Latin cross honoring the men and women who gave their lives in World War I. We went to the Supreme Court. We won 5-4. Scalia was one of those 5. We're one justice away from the Supreme Court ordering veterans memorials torn down all over this country if they had the image of a cross or any religion. U.S. sovereignty. Many of y'all are familiar with the case Medellin versus Texas, where we stood up and fought the World Court of the United Nations, and the President of the United States, who was a Republican, and we defended the proposition that the United Nations and World Court cannot bind U.S. law, and no president can give away our sovereignty.
Yeah.
We won that case. 6-3 on the first iteration. The second time around, it was 5-4. Scalia was one of those 5, and we're one justice away from seeing our sovereignty stripped away. It is right after right after right that is hanging by a thread. Now, we know what justice is Hillary Clinton. If Hillary Clinton is president, every justice she appoints will be a left-wing ideologue who will vote to strip away the Bill of Rights. And I can tell you a significant factor in my deciding today to support Donald Trump is today the Trump campaign put out a list of Supreme Court justices. Included at the top of the list my friend and colleague, Senator Mike Lee, who would make an extraordinary and then, importantly, promised that the only people who would be considered for Supreme Court nominations are the names on that list. Campaign had never said that. That list is a very, very strong list, and I got to tell you, for me and for every one of us who care about the Constitution and Bill of Rights, that is a big, big deal to make the promise. This is the list, and you could know the people from whom justices will be picked. That was a big factor and a powerful factor for me in making my decision. Another factor is Obamacare. Men and women in this room and across Texas know what an absolute disaster Obamacare has been. It has devastated this country. Millions of Americans who've lost their health care, who've lost their doctor, who've seen their premiums skyrocket. Now, Republican leadership, my best friends. But they have committed, if we hold Republican majorities in Congress, that will pass legislation repealing Obamacare. What I can tell you is I know beyond a shadow of a doubt Hillary Clinton would veto that legislation. And Donald Trump has promised he would sign it. For someone who has devoted my time in the Senate to fighting with all of my might to stop the train wreck that is Obamacare, that was another factor that mattered. A third factor that matters to me, and I think matters to Texans and Americans, is energy. We've seen this administration waging a war on coal, waging a war trying to strangle the oil and gas industry at a time when we desperately need economic growth. The dumbest thing in the world to do is to fail to develop the incredible, bountiful resources God has given this country. We're on the verge of energy independence. We're on the verge of being an energy powerhouse. If the federal government would just shut up and get out of the way. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt if Hillary Clinton were president, she would continue the war on coal and oil and gas, and Donald Trump has promised that he would not. The third factor that matters. A fourth issue that matters to me and many people in this room is immigration. Look, immigration has been an issue. Lots of politicians talk about it. find out when they get in office they don't always tend to do what they said. But what we do know is Hillary Clinton has promised not only to maintain but to extend Obama's illegal executive amnesty to every single person here illegally. That's what she's telling us she's going to do. And Donald has said that he would revoke President Obama's illegal executive orders. A fifth difference is national security. You know, for 7 years we've seen the Obama administration engaging in willful blindness, engaging in such a politically correct, blinkered view of protecting this country that they refuse to confront or acknowledge or address in any meaningful way the scourge of radical Islamic terrorism. I chaired a hearing in the Senate. I chaired the Oversight Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, a hearing on the willful blindness of this administration. We heard testimony from a whistleblower of the Department of Homeland Security about how the White House led a purge, and that was your word, purge, deleting over 800 files or modifying them at the Department of Homeland Security to delete references to jihad or Muslim Brotherhood or other terms that were deemed inconsistent with their political agenda.
Yeah.
We all remember the horrific terror attack in Orlando. You may recall that the terrorist there who went into that nightclub, murdering and wounding people and committing mayhem, he called 911. And he pledged his allegiance to ISIS. He pledged his allegiance to al-Baghdadi on the tape. Well, the Obama Justice Department released that tape, and they literally edited out that portion. I don't think it was Richard Nixon's secretary just blanking out the tape. But they edited it out, and then Loretta Lynch had the audacity to say, we may never know why he did it. And it is rather amazing when you literally erase the portion of the tape where he says, this is why I'm doing it. Willful blindness is dangerous. And we have President Obama, who has pledged to bring in tens of thousands of Middle Eastern refugees, who the FBI has told us they cannot vet to make sure they're not terrorists. Hillary Clinton has pledged to continue that. She would continue the willful blindness. She would continue bringing in unvetted refugees. And Donald Trump has pledged to stop the flood of unvetted refugees. And the sixth factor that was important to me in thinking about this is the question of internet freedom. Many of y'all may have been following the fight that I've been leading in the Senate to stop the Obama administration's misguided plan to hand over control of the internet to foreign nations, including Russia and China and Iran. You know, what is it with liberals? Jimmy Carter gave away the Panama Canal, and Obama wants to give away the internet. It's crazy and it's dangerous. It undermines our security and it undermines our freedom because these countries are not believers in the First Amendment, to put it mildly. And during this fight, Hillary Clinton has said she supports Obama's effort to give away control of the internet. And just this week, Trump came out and publicly, vocally, and strongly supported our effort to keep the internet free from foreign control, free from censorship, and to protect free speech on it. So those are the factors I weighed and considered. And at the end of the day, I made the decision that what my conscience tells me to do is I know Hillary would follow through on every one of those promises. I know the devastation that would happen to this country on that front. And I don't believe I could in good conscience look my kids in the eye and said, I sat by and let that happen. And the only thing standing in the way of Hillary winning at this point is Donald Trump. Now, every one of you has to make your own decision. You have to make your own decision what's the right thing to do, what's consistent with your conscience, with your morals, with the Constitution. And I can tell you this, regardless of who wins, I know for darn sure that the men and women in this room are going to hold whoever is elected accountable for their actions.
Yeah.
And that's one thing you all take very seriously, is holding every one of us accountable. You know, Joanne was talking about a statewide elected official who said, well, that doesn't count me. I promise you that wasn't me who said that. I promise you that, because let me tell you, it is absolutely your right and your responsibility to hold all of us accountable, including me. And that is a responsibility I take very seriously, that I work for each and every one of you. And I can tell you, anytime we see the federal government disregarding the Constitution and Bill of Rights, you've got my word, I'm going to stand up and fight to stop it. And my political priorities over the next 2 months are very simple. They are, number one, I intend to do everything I can to defeat Hillary Clinton in her race for the White House. You know, I know Hillary really wants to get back to government housing.
Oh.
But I had a smaller place in mind with fewer windows.
Yeah! Woo! Oh, yeah!
A second thing that I am working hard to preserve is doing everything I can to keep a Republican majority in the United States Senate.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of days when I wish the Republican majority did more. And I've said that before, and I will keep saying that, and I hope in January to continue saying that to our Republican majority. But I'll tell you 4 words I hope